G'day everyone, thanks for tuning in. This video is part 3 and hopefully the final part of the work that I'm doing on the windows in my Toyota Coaster. Before I get started, I have a confession to make, and that is that I've kind of chickened out on some of the work I originally planned for the windows. Not so much a case of being scared to do the work, just more of a case of I just really couldn't be bothered. So my original plan for the windows was this. At the very back of the bus there are 4 smaller fixed windows that don't actually open, and with my layout those windows are all going to be built in. My bathroom's going at the very back of the bus, so they'll all have built-in cupboards and storage walls and things in front of them. You won't be able to see out of them anyway. So I had a couple of reasons for wanting to remove those. A big reason was just for peace of mind, to make sure there was no rust underneath. The other reason I wanted to remove those windows was because they're not going to be visible, you're not going to be able to see out of them. I thought it would be a good idea to do what some people do and actually replace the glass with aluminium composite panel. The more I think about it, the more I think it's just not necessary to take those windows out. There's very minimal rust under the windows I have removed so far. Even the ones that were leaking, there's very minimal rust underneath those. So the chances of finding significant rust under the other windows is pretty slim. Now, those 2 rearmost windows at the sides of the bus are quite different from the others. There's no actual frame with those windows. They're actually glued on to the side of the bus, and they're glued on quite securely with construction adhesive. It would be a huge job to get those windows off the bus, first of all. And second of all, I think it would be tricky. Now, having looked at it a bit more closely, I think it would be quite tricky to attach aluminium composite panel because there's quite a bit of curve in the window, and so it would be a bit fiddly to, when the panel's glued on, you would have to be able to clamp it sort of all the way around so that you had good adhesion. I don't know, it would certainly be doable, but it'd be a lot of work. I'm just not convinced that it's necessary. I've taken off the inside trim on those windows and given them a really good clean, and I can actually see up to, from the outside and the inside, up to where the gasket between the window and the bus is actually glued on. There is absolutely no sign of rust there at all that I can tell. So chances of there being something under that, just where the glue is on the window, pretty slim. Now that I've got the glass out of my other windows, I actually weighed the glass and compared it to the weight of a piece of aluminium composite panel I've actually got here. The difference was quite small. So realistically, if I took out those 4 windows at the back and replaced them with the panel, I'd be looking at saving maybe 10 kilos. Maybe a little bit more, which is, you know, honestly, if I'm going to worry about 10 kilos, then I've got other problems. I guess I'm getting to the point in this build where I don't want to create unnecessary work for myself. I've been in quite hard work to get the bus to the stage it's at now. I'm at the point where I really just want to start building the inside. I've decided to keep all of the windows. I won't be replacing any of the glass with aluminium panel. And the windows that will have furniture and fridge, etc. in front of them, I will actually cover up with some sort of opaque vinyl or something. So that's the first thing that I've kind of chickened out of. The second job that I had originally planned to do was the window tinting. I thought while the glass was out, that I would have a go at tinting the windows myself. I've never done window tinting before. I mean, I've never done any of this stuff that I've been doing before, and I just kind of make it up and learn as I go along. And I'd watched quite a few YouTube videos on window tinting. I'd even bought some film and some tools from eBay that I was going to start having a go. But when I actually started doing the work, I found even getting the windows clean enough to start with was really hard and almost impossible in this environment to get them like dust free. And so like I cleaned one window panel and it still had dust and specks, and I just knew it would be a nightmare to try and tint over that. And so I decided, you know what, I'm just going to pay to have the windows professionally tinted. Yeah, I've been quoted $900 to do the whole bus, which I actually think is reasonable, especially now that I've sort of had to think about what it would actually involve doing it myself. So now that I've decided all that, I can get started on doing the last little bit of work I need to do on the window frames. I can replace all of the rubber seals in the windows that I've removed and get the windows reinstalled into the bus. So I managed to get all the mastic off these window frames and gave them a wash to get rid of as much of the dirt and mud that was on them as I could. So they're certainly looking a lot cleaner now. There's just one more thing I want to do with these frames before they're ready to go back into the bus. I'm actually going to give them a coat of paint because you can see, especially on this one here, that the black is actually starting to wear off and fade in a lot of places. There's a few that have got scuff marks and scratches on them. They're just looking really worn and dull. So I'm just going to give them a light sand and then I'm going to spray them with an epoxy enamel glossy black paint, which should freshen them up and have them looking pretty schmick. Before I sanded the frames, I just gave them a quick wipe with some terps just to remove the last little bits of mastic that were stuck to some of the frames. And then I gave them all a light sand just using 400 grit wet and dry sandpaper, which should help to just scratch up the surface a little bit and hopefully get the paint to stick better. I'm also just going to do a little bit of rust repair on this driver's window frame. This part of the latch that's attached to the frame you can see is pretty rusty. It's only surface rust, so I'm not too worried about it. I'm just going to give it a light sand and then paint it with the good old Penetrol. So this is my little makeshift spray booth that I've set up, and it's actually working really well because the way that the frame sits on the timber, as you can see, it's actually the inside part of the frame that sits on the timber, and it means that the front face and the edges of that, which is the bit of the frame that I'm painting, isn't actually touching anything. So it just helps to keep the edges free so that I'm not mucking up my paint. Believe it or not, this is actually the first time I've ever spray painted anything. So my first attempt, which I didn't actually get on camera, was pretty rough. And while doing that, I actually found that while it was pretty easy to do the horizontal parts, when I tried spraying down the sides vertically, I found was when I had the most trouble, and I ended up getting a lot of runs and drips, and it just looked really crappy, and I ended up having to remove all the paint, sand it back again and redo it. And so the easiest way for me, I found, was just do one side at a time horizontally and then turn the frame and do the next side and so on. That just worked for me. I just found it easier to get an even spray that way. Okay, well, I'm just going to leave them to dry there now. Hopefully they're not going to get too much dust on them in here. It is a little bit breezy today, but I've got them inside the shed and I'm just going to leave them alone for a few hours and see what they're like. I have to say they do look better already, even though it was my first ever job using a spray can and I probably did a bit of a crappy job on them. But we'll just have to wait and see what it's like when it dries, but it's already looking a lot better than they did before, so I'm happy with that. I've just got the driver's window frame left to do, but I've painted this latch with Penetrol, so I just need to wait for that to dry before I can paint the enamel on. So these are the clips that were holding the windows in place, and before I go putting them back in, I want to try and clean them up a bit, because you can see like some of them, like these ones here, are actually still in pretty good condition with no rust, but then there's others, you know, like this one here, that have actually got quite a bit of rust on them. So I'm just going to try kind of soaking them in a solution of rust converter for a little bit and see what that does. I'm not sure if you can buy new ones of these. You probably can, but structurally these are still in good nick, so I want to be able to reuse them. I just want to clean them up a bit before I put them back in. So I've got this stuff here. It's called Rain-X. It's a rust converter. I don't know if this is the best stuff to use or not, but I have this, so I'm going to give it a go and just see. So I'm just going to pour a little bit into here. and then basically dunk the rusty ones in here and just see what happens. Okay, so they've been here sitting in this stuff for a few minutes. There's certainly quite a lot of stuff in the water. How much of that's dirt and how much of that's rust, it's hard to tell. But they do actually, from what I can see, they look like they might be a bit cleaner. So I'm going to tip some of this stuff out and see what I'm left with. Actually, you know what? They do look quite a bit cleaner. So I might actually give them another dip with some fresh stuff. Because, yeah, they are definitely looking, like, look at that one. Definitely much cleaner than when they went in. Alright, so I'm going to give them another dip. And hopefully get the last few little bits of rust off. Okay, well this is the final result. I'm actually really happy with that. They've cleaned up really well for a few minutes work. I mean, they're not obviously brand new, but they look pretty clean, and most of the rust has been converted, so yeah, I'm pretty happy to go ahead and reuse all of those. Here's a tip if you're going to be taking out your windows, is to just keep an eye out and keep absolutely every little piece that is removed, especially even things like this. These little blocks are actually supposed to be attached to the sides of the window frame, and I think they're designed to just help the window frame sit properly against the side of the bus. Now quite a few of these actually fell off in the process of taking out the windows. So you can see on this frame here, it still has the 3 blocks in place. So there's this one here, one in the middle and one at the other end. But if I come up to the other side, I'll show you, maybe a bit harder to see, but it's got the one at this end and the one at this end, but the one in the middle, you can see the mark that's left where it should have been. Unfortunately, I wasn't even aware of these at the beginning. I wasn't really paying enough attention. And by the time I realised what these things actually were and how important they were, I think I'd managed to lose a few. So I've actually only got 10 of these left that are loose that I could find on the ground, and I'm actually missing 12. So I'm actually missing 2 of these. So that's a bit annoying. I'm not sure if you can buy new ones of these, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to repurpose a couple of the window stoppers that I've taken out, because I've got these. So these are the window stoppers, the little blocks that are in the bottom of the window frame that stop the window sliding fully open. All of these I've taken out as well in the process of taking out the glass, and I'm not going to be putting them all back in because there's a few windows in the bus that I actually do want to be able to fully open, so I'm not going to be putting the stoppers back in. And I've worked out that I can actually sand the stoppers down a little bit so that they're the exact height of these blocks, and I'm just going to use a couple of those in place of them, and hopefully that will do the trick. But yeah, that's just a good tip, just to make sure you keep an eye on these. If you do see any fall off, make sure you grab them, put them aside, because you need to stick them back on before you put the windows back in. You can see that the window stopper is only a fraction higher than the square blocks, so I only need to sand off a tiny bit. So I just used a piece of very coarse sandpaper just to sand down the window stopper, and it actually worked really well. So you can see here that they ended up being almost exactly the same size. So I'm pretty happy with my little repurpose hack. I think it'll do the job nicely. There's also a few of the windows that have this different kind of shape block along the bottom edge as well, and you can see a few of those have fallen off in the process of taking out the window, so you just need to be careful and keep an eye out for those as well. So I just went around and stuck all the loose blocks back onto the frames using a bit of Sika. I'm using Sika 221, which is just what I had already. It would have been much better to use the black Sika rather than the white, but I already had a white can open and I wasn't going to go get a whole new tube of Sika, which is quite expensive, just to do this little bit. If there are any bits visible at the end, I can always cut the excess away once the Sika's cured. So I'm using genuine Toyota window seals. I got these from Coaster Parts in New South Wales, and each seal is specific for a particular window. So when you order them, you need to make sure that you order the right windows. The reason I'm using the genuine Toyota ones is, first of all, I just figure, it's pretty important for me to have a bus that's completely watertight. I'm not prepared to compromise on that at all, and I just figure that if you get genuine Toyota seals that are designed to fit the window exactly, it should theoretically be a much better fit than if you just got a generic brand of rubber and cut it to size. So that was the first reason. The other reason is because the genuine Toyota ones, as you can see, come with all the holes pre-cut. So there needs to be quite a few holes in the rubber, not only for the drainage holes at the bottom of the frame, but also the windows like this one here that have sliding glass panels, have latches on the side and other things that the seal needs to be able to fit around. So if you get the genuine Toyota ones, all of the holes are already pre-cut, ready to go, and it's really easy to tell which way around the seal goes, because obviously the holes in the seal will match up exactly with the holes that you have in your frame. A lot of people buy the generic Bailey channel rubber seal and just cut it to size to fit the windows. But if you do it that way, you also then need to go around and cut all the drainage holes and all the other holes. I just decided that was too much of a pain. And the other thing about these Toyota ones, you can see it's one continuous loop. There's no joins in it at all. So again, for me, yes, they are quite a bit more expensive. It cost me, I think, about $900, including shipping, for the seals to do the 7 windows that I've taken out. So it's not cheap. I'm not sure exactly the price of the Bailey channel, the generic sort of brand, but it is several $100s cheaper, so it is a lot cheaper to go that way. But like I said, having a watertight bus is kind of my number one priority. So this was just one of those expenses in the build that I wasn't really prepared to compromise on. I wanted to make sure I got really good quality. So that's why I went with the genuine Toyota ones. And like I said, it's pretty easy to tell which way around they go. Obviously, when you look at the rubber, one side is all rubber. On the other side, there's a couple of felt channels. The felt channels are designed for the glass panels to slide across, so they need to go towards the inside, like away from the frame, so the rubber side goes up against the metal, and it's just a matter of lining it up and then pressing it into the frame. It's a bit fiddly, like you have to kind of take your time and get it to fit in, but it does actually fit in really well if you take your time. You don't need any contact adhesive or anything to hold it in there. It's a nice tight fit once you get it all in. So it's going to be hard to show this properly on camera, and honestly I think it'll make more sense when you've actually got the seal and the frame in front of you and you can see how they fit together. But the way I do it is this middle part of the seal here, I put on first, so it gets pressed over the middle bit. So then I sort of press that on for part of the length, and then once I've got that in place, then it's just a matter of kind of tucking in the channels on either side of it. And like I said, it's a bit fiddly, especially when you're just getting it started, but eventually it does all push in nicely. Okay, well the seal's in, so now comes the tricky part. I've got to try and get the glass panels back in, and also this center strip that goes in the middle. Hopefully I can do that without breaking anything. Fingers crossed. Now, the way this center bar goes in, again, I think it's a little bit easier to see when you've got the genuine Toyota rubbers. This center bar needs to sit into that hole there, and there's two screw holes you can see that screw into the end of this thing. And if you look here where the rubber is, you can see that one side of the rubber has like a V-shaped notch in it, and that's designed to match up with this V-shaped rubber side of the center bar. So see how this one side's got this large sort of V-shaped rubber, and on the other side it's a much narrower piece of metal or plastic, whatever it is. So that notched out bit of rubber there is designed to match up with this notched bit of rubber here. So it basically sits in like that. So that means that this the V-shaped rubber face of the center bar is facing towards the back of the bus. Now the other piece that has to go in before this center bar is this little fuzzy bit here. It's like a little piece of metal or plastic that's got felt on it, and it's designed to sit into this space here, and then this pushes up into it. So I'm going to do that first, and then get this to sit in there. Well guys, I'm going to end this video here. I was really hoping to show you footage of me putting all the windows back in the bus and testing them to make sure they're all watertight and so on, but it's going to be a little while, unfortunately, before I can do that. The reason is that the tendonitis that I've had trouble with in my elbow for quite some time now has actually been getting worse recently, and I've actually got a little tear in the tendon there now. I've actually today had a cortisone injection into the joint to try and get it to heal. So my arm's going to be out of action for at least a couple of days until that settles down, and I've been told I really need to rest it properly for longer than that, which is really frustrating because all I really want to do is get cracking and finish the job on the window so that I can get some other things done to the bus. But this problem with my elbow has been going on for almost a year now. It started when I was working on my big bus about 12 months ago, and it's just been getting progressively worse. And I know that if I don't properly take time out and treat it now, it's only going to get even worse, and it might get to the point where I just can't properly use my arm at all. I don't want that. So I'm going to follow the doc's advice, and I'm going to give the arm a really good rest and try and give it the best possible chance to heal properly. So that means that it may be a couple of weeks or even longer before I can actually put the windows back in, because they are quite heavy to lift. Even with someone else helping me, there's still a little bit of weight in them, and you know, I heard it just the other day, even just doing the work that I've been doing on the windows. So I did get my dad to help me the other day. We did actually get one of the windows in. I didn't film it because it was kind of a practice one. I wanted to make sure that we were doing it the right way, and then my plan was to film the rest, which I will do at some point. But I can at least show you the window that we did get in. And basically all I did was run a thick bead of mastic around the inside of the frame, so all along the inside here, and I also put another bead of mastic on to the bus where that frame's going to stick to, and then Dad and I just lifted carefully the window into place, pressed it against the side of the bus, and Dad just kind of held it on the outside while I went around the inside and put those 6 clips back on the inside. That's all you need to do to put the windows back in. Once you get them all reassembled, it's fairly straightforward to get them back. So it's frustrating, but I will get around to filming putting the windows back in and testing them for leaks and all of that, but it may be a little while before I can get the next video out. And I wanted to put this one out as soon as possible because I've had a few questions from people about the rubber seals that I've been using and a few other things, so I wanted to at least get this video out so you guys can see that part of it and how I actually put the windows back together. So that's it for now. Hopefully it won't be too long before I can finish putting the windows in and show you guys the finished result.